Hi everybody, it's Nigel Giam here, the Lead GP Training Program Director for St Mary's Scheme and Course Director for Mentor MRCGP. And I am very, very happy and indeed proud to have Irbaz here. Irbaz and I go back some way. You've done amazing. Top scorer, 100 plus. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigel. So good to see you again.
Yeah.
And good to see you on the other side of this.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. No more tough love to be dispensed from me to you.
well, yeah, I've had your fair share, haven't I? And which
Um,
appreciate all the way. So
No,
yeah,
no, no, absolutely. It's absolutely my pleasure. I know when you WhatsApp me, you're in a state of shock and literally had to check the result about four times, but I
yeah,
I always knew you were going to do really, really well. Do tell the audience just a little bit about your journey, because obviously you
yeah.
took the SCA once, and obviously at that point got set back a little bit, knocked your
Mm,
confidence down. I think you scored about 70.5, didn't you?
that's correct. Yeah, the first time in March
Yeah.
earlier this year.
And when you prepared for that
Mm.
first sitting, what were you actually expecting to happen? What did you think was going to happen in the exam?
I mean, by that point, we've heard a lot of stories from other people, and I think going into the exam, I think I did your observer course
Mm.
probably early February or mid-February or something. So there wasn't a lot of time to kind of go back and kind of apply quite a few of those
Yeah.
things. But I think going into the exam, I was quite worried, because whilst I thought I might have done just about enough.
Yeah.
I was still worried that, how do I deal with tough
Yeah.
negotiations? How do I deal with difficult social circumstances? And I think, you know, it was it was quite challenging, to be fair. And when I sat the exam, I thought, I might have just crossed the line. So
Yeah.
when I got the results, it was a shock,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, obviously I need to do something different,
Different.
something that I
Yeah.
haven't done the first time around. And
Yeah.
and and I thought of all the options of what that could be and kind of weighed the pros and cons. And then that's where kind of the journey to start preparing for the second sitting
Fitting.
took
Yeah.
place.
And it was so successful because I mean your score went up by 30. You're a top
Mm.
scorer, which is someone who scores over 100 in this exam, and that's no easy feat. I mean, that's literally top 1% of people who take
Yeah.
it. So there were some massive game changers, and obviously you and I
Mm.
worked very closely together over
That's right.
one-to-ones following the observer course. Although you weren't an active participant, you understood the ground rules of I suppose how I developed the session and what we
That's
do.
right. Yeah.
So I thought for the audience it'd be very useful just to break it down in terms of the three domains and talk about some sentinel game changers. I might just share with the audience at this point actually the breakdown of your marks, so this kind of puts things into context for everybody. So I mean, in terms of your data gathering, it was pretty strong. It has to be said. Getting sort of 29 out of 36, you dropped. Some marks. There was a failure there, but that's okay. And we'll talk, I suppose, a little bit about how we maximize that marks. Clinical
Mm.
management's always a difficult one because, it's 1.5 times weighted heavier compared to the other two domains.
Yeah.
And you're going to get some quite emotive, challenging patients. But what was so crazily impressive, and, out of the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've mentored, I have never seen a mark like this relating to others. I mean, you only dropped 2 marks. That's
Yeah.
mad. That's
Yeah.
absolutely
Why
amazing.
did I lose those marks?
Ah, damn it. We will find out soon in this interview. So let's start with the data gathering. I mean, what were your game changers between the last sitting? We obviously
Mm.
had the masterclass. We had
Mm.
on sessions. I mean, that was a good score. I mean, that was a good score. What
I,
did you do?
I worked very hard in data gathering, but I think doing these sessions and seeing patients, I did quickly realize that the IPS feeds in quite a lot to
Yeah,
data gathering, and it's quite interlinked. And often you see people with same marks around IPS and data gathering, and I think there is a very solid link between the two.
I agree.
And I think my take of all this was that if we talked a lot about, I know you're talking about data gathering, but I'm going to sort of relate to the
Yeah,
IPS as well,
go for
because
it.
I just feel they're so interlinked. Because if you are picking up the cues, if you are picking up not just verbal cues, they will definitely drop verbal cues, but often in this exam, they drop facial cues.
Yeah.
And it's so important to pick that facial cue up and reflect that back. And I can give an example where a patient was, low in mood, and was started talking about something he enjoyed in the past.
Mm.
And I just reflected that back. I said, "Well, you looked really happy when you were talking about
Yeah.
that particular event," and you could just see that conversation developing,
Yeah.
and what that ultimately did was built that rapport,
Yeah.
which in turn helped so much with the data gathering because
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it became really free, and you
Yeah.
see it just changed the nature of the conversation, and it was no longer a I'm the doctor, you're the patient. It
Yeah.
was more of let's talk about your story
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
see what's going on
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
and I think that approach was the reason that they fed in so well with each other on
Mm.
reflecting back because I can, in hindsight, it's wonderful, isn't it? You can look into
Yeah.
it and,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
lots of things, but that's my reflection on those two.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what? It's just so sensible, isn't it? And I suppose that's the
yeah.
reason why we've developed our story symptom system mantra,
Mm.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
actually the data gathering starts with the patient's narrative and the
Mm.
cue, as you've just so rightly mentioned, it's the king queen of the consultation. And in a
Yeah.
standard exam, cues can only be given a certain amount of time. So if you choose to park that cue, it's really going to be at your peril in terms of the data gathering and in relating to others, actually.
Yeah, and it's strange because I think we talk about picking up the cues, and in one of the case really frustrated me. And whilst we obviously can't talk about the
Mm.
specifics, I picked up the cue and I tried to follow up on it, and the patient still didn't give me much information. I was
Yeah.
like, "Come on, I picked it up.
I
You're supposed to
know,
tell
I
me
know.
information now."
Yeah,
But what I learned was you just have to keep finding ways to you know, different ways to figure out the queue. It might have been, for instance, that it's too early to try and open
yeah,
up that queue. So you pick it up, you explore it. If they're not giving much information, then just go back to your routine and
yeah. That's
structure,
right.
so you can breathe a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
but come back to it when you've built up that
Exactly.
rapport.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You're right. I mean, cues have to be followed through, but sometimes I suppose also, I mean, the simulator will try and help you. So actually, if you're following almost the wrong cue, they won't take you
Hmm.
down a blind end.
That's
They
right.
will
Yeah.
bring you back to it. So that data gathering is really important. The cue pickup rate. In terms of case priming, explain to the audience what your
Hmm.
understanding of case priming is.
Yeah, case priming is absolutely crucial. It's so crucial because, and in March, it may have cost me my exam actually,
Mm.
because I think one case I just completely didn't read the second page in the March exam. And again, it's priming skills, it's getting into, thinking about what the case might be about. And if you're doing that, you would not miss the second page.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And second thing was that in the exam, I really did try to prime very hard in all the cases. It was difficult sometimes under stress.
Yeah, it
In
is. It's
all
tiring.
honesty, there's lots of information. Sometimes you're just reading but not processing it
Yeah,
properly. But the thing is that at least I tried to do that,
yeah,
and somewhere along the line, it obviously worked.
yeah,
So yeah, it's so crucial. Sometimes you get the priming wrong. So, like a case, I thought it was about someone who's being abused, but it wasn't. It was something completely different. So you
yeah,
do need the mental kind of flexibility to
yeah,
then go back to your structure
yeah,
and try and stick to a structure if you've miscalculated, and then
yeah,
reassessing things as you go on. Again, that goes down to picking up the cues.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it just keeps going around in circles, really.
yeah,
If you prime well and picking up the cues, great. If you've primed wrongly, but you're picking up the cues, it will probably correct you
yeah.
and bring you back to the center.
Where you need to be. So if we move
Hmm.
on to the clinical management section, what would be your top tips with regards to maximizing marks there?
So clinical management starts off with data gathering. So you do need to gather the data. I did realize in this case in the exam sometimes I did go beyond the 6 minute mark in the data gathering. I didn't feel comfortable into moving into management without having asked a few questions.
Yeah, of course.
So that does really set the tone. But coming into the management, it's just really important to lay all the information that you think you've gathered, appropriately, and putting that in front of the patient, and essentially just talking, verbalizing your thoughts
Yeah,
in a patient-centered way.
yeah,
Um, and once you verbalize the thoughts, there could be a bit of uncertainty.
yeah,
And therefore, but if you're verbalizing your thought process, actually managing that uncertainty
yeah,
becomes easier
yeah,
because the patient's listening to you and they're like, oh, okay, so the doctor's actually
yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he's not just throwing off options
yeah, yeah,
that are quite random. So then you can link it, you see.
yeah,
So putting it all there and then talking about what you can do and what we can do in a
yeah,
shared way and
yeah.
all of that, I think.
I'd
What's
say
that?
it's an important skill, actually, just in real life as well, because actually we don't always have the answer. So
Yeah.
sharing uncertainty is a really good way of ensuring that we, in this partnership, both patient and doctor have
Mm.
a role in taking on
Yeah.
that responsibility. If we now, I suppose, forward that on a little bit in terms of relating to others, which is obviously your top mark. I mean, as I said, I've never seen anyone drop so few marks here. What did you kind of take away, I suppose, from the mentoring sessions, and how did you maximize that mark?
I think a lot of the times I did talk about how very early on just set the stage to say, don't worry, there's lots we can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes there would be issues that the patients came in. It could be related to difficulty getting an appointment
Mm,
or because of various reasons. They could be a traveler of some sort or they could just be finding it difficult to get an appointment at the
mm,
surgery or it could be something completely different. Like, they're not too sure that we can do much to help. And just by saying it early on, just kind of acknowledging their thought, and then telling them actually, I know where that's coming from. There's so much we can do, and at that point the patient's on the same wavelength, and then you can move forward from that worry that they have and talk about everything else you kind of want to get out of,
yeah, yeah,
in terms of data gathering.
yeah,
So a lot of it is about just telling the patient, don't worry, we're here to support you.
yeah,
And if it's a colleague you're talking to, my experience in this exam is, not paternalistically, but just, show them that you're there to support
yeah,
them in terms
yeah,
of helping them
yeah, yeah,
through
yeah,
whatever difficulty that they're going through as well.
yeah,
Whether it's speaking to a practice nurse or
mm,
a district nurse or whatever.
yeah. So I
Mm.
suppose the acronym that we use on the course, which you'll be very familiar with, obviously, is AEE.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Perhaps for the audience, you'll explain what that means, because a lot of people will just go, "What on earth does AEE?"
Yeah, so A is acknowledging the patient's whatever concern is,
Yeah,
and I know Nigel's testing me a bit here to make sure I remember what it stands for, but you acknowledge, you then I suppose you empathize with
empathize.
that situation, and then you energize, don't
Yeah,
you? And so it kind of within that framework. So I think because we've done it enough, so I didn't really it was just happening naturally by that
happening.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is important
yeah,
because what could happen is that you overdo AEE, which again you shouldn't do. It takes away from the strength of this
yeah, yeah.
framework. So I think using it once or two times appropriately,
That's right.
again picking up the patient's cues,
Yeah,
cue based, being more so if they're worried about, you sense they're worried with the facial expression.
yeah, yeah,
If you pick that up and you acknowledge that, I can see
yeah,
you're worried,
yeah,
and I can see why you're worried.
yeah,
But don't worry, there's lots of things we can do.
yeah.
So it's really important that you're reactive with this AE and,
Yeah.
and can actually pick up those cues because
Exactly. I know.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
I think
crucial.
what I often see is with a lot of trainees who
Mm.
really suffer with IPS is they go through the motions of saying, "I'm sorry." It's like, well, it doesn't come across as sincere. There's no energy.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's right. Yeah, if it's
and
not if it's very formulaic and the way it's used, it loses. It's a great thing because it only really works if you use it properly,
yeah, yeah.
and in a reactive way, to the patient's emotions. If you use it in a way where you're just doing it through and throughout, you might lose marks.
It's just going to lose its potency, and it's lose its sincerity and its meaning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think what I really like is the fact that you've recognized that it's kind of this aspect of energy that we talk about. I mean, energy creates energy. And
Mm, mm.
unfortunately, with the September sitting, there are so many people who are just feeling so flat with their energy.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you going to say to these guys? Because, we had such a blast doing our one-to-ones. I mean, I have to say, I actually miss them because I just like, they were just so
Yeah,
funny.
me too. No, I missed them, and it was great.
I don't even
And
actually know if we did any learning, to be fair. But anyway, they were fun all the
well, there
same.
we go, isn't it? We were just chatting, weren't we? And
But you got your mark, and that's where we're
that's
at.
what IPS is, isn't it?
It is very good. So,
There we go. So
what's your kind of closing message for these guys who are feeling a bit low?
yeah. I think it's I've been where you've been. If you haven't made it, and it's really hard. It's really sad, and I completely feel that. Um, but just think what you haven't done in your revision before that. If you follow the same path of revision as you did the first time, the chances are you're going to end up with the same result
Hmm.
because you need to actively put in effort to really think and reflect what went wrong. And I know with this exam, you sometimes come out and think it's unfair, and it may well be, but you just have to, pick yourself up and just do something different. And like I said, just repeating the same strategy is a strategy for failure, not success. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, you have to believe in yourself that you can do it. And I really struggled with that.
Mm.
And I think, every time I did a session, you just come out of thinking, no, you can. And I think it's one of those things where where mentoring is helpful because you got somebody who's an expert telling you can, and that's always helpful. And the third thing I would say is, which might sound a bit odd, but maybe it's not about the medicine. Maybe it's about other things in your life. Maybe it's about your mindset
Mm.
and the mindset that you can do things that you think you can't do.
Mm.
Like for instance, in between all this, I went for surfing because I first of all don't really like going in the sea, and I never thought it's something I could do. And I did it, like albeit it's a couple of sessions, but I did it, and it made me feel that I can do things that I can't do. And it's just all about the mindset,
Mm.
somewhat. And once you've got all, mindset in place and you've got this kind of attitude, yeah, you perhaps can do this actually. And then the medicine will start to kick in as well
Mm.
because all these techniques and things won't really work if you're just
Mm.
constantly thinking, I can't do this.
Exactly. Never
Yeah.
put this exam on a pedestal because it is so attainable. And actually, what I
Yeah.
really loved is that, through our sessions, you could always see there's hope. There's always hope. There's
Yeah.
always something you can do to change. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just so happy with the result, and I'm so proud of you as well because actually, I mean, that is just a mammoth result. So tell us a little bit about what the plan is. When are you due to CCT?
So I'm due to CCT in April next year.
Oh, blimey.
Um,
That's a bit. Can't we shorten that? No, no.
Yeah, well, it probably can, but actually, I'd rather be in a position where, have a life vest and in a swimming pool, all
Yeah, a
nice
bit
and
more
cozy rather
surfing.
than,
Yeah,
yeah,
sounds good.
rather than, being in the open seas or on my
Yeah,
own when you CCT, isn't it? So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't mind. I think, I think I can enjoy being a trainee,
Yeah,
put it that way, because the last 6 months have been really tough.
yeah, of course.
But I do feel that in some ways, if you've passed, you've got this obligation, and to help colleagues and peers who haven't made it. And I think
Mhm.
the message I would like to give is, if you're in that position, do help people around you, do help your colleagues, because I feel, when I didn't make it the first time, um, not having that kind of support really puts you down, and
Yeah,
having collegial support is it's really lovely to have, and
yeah,
it's, yeah. So we all grow together, basically.
exactly, exactly. Well, look, I'm just so happy for you, and honestly, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Very inspiring for everybody. I expect
Mm.
big things from you. I will be following you.
Well, well, no, me too. I'll be following you, and we'll definitely stay in touch because it was so wonderful to having spoken to you,
Uh,
and being mentored, and just having a real good chat, really.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's good because the great thing about these things for me is that you kind of teach and then you become peers and then you become friends. So it's been amazing, Irbaz. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Nigel. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Bye.
Take care.